Welcome to the Missouri Liberty Alliance. Today is Sunday, November 7th, 2021. Today we have a special guest. We're talking about all things pro-life in the state of Missouri and how Missouri has done what it's done when things, basically get to that point where you can say, we've done a really good job in our state going pro-life. Everything pro-life. We have Dave Plemmons with the Missouri Right to Life. He's a director of the Political Action Committee for Missouri Right to Life. Plus, I'm very proud to say and happy to say, a decades-old friend. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what. One thing I'm going to start it out with a question. After that, it's going to be a conversation. Missouri has done a lot of wonderful things in the entire sphere of everything pro-life. What would you say you're most proud of? What's your proudest moment for Missouri coming together for the unborn?
Wow.
I know there's probably a lot of them.
Question. I'll be honest. It's probably going to be legislatively. It's probably going to be 2017's session when we passed the laws that had to do with some clinic reg tightening, because we did something that we haven't been able to do before, and that is we have now disclosure for complication reports.
Mm-hmm.
One of the main things that that was a motivator for me to get involved in the pro-life movement, a couple of decades ago, was seeing the inspection reports and the injuries of women in Missouri who had been the clients of these abortion mills and were treated terribly because of lack of oversight and really, really shoddy conditions. So we know there's injuries. We know there are bad actors out there when it comes to the abortionists. So we had to find ways to bring that into the light by increasing the ability for our lawmakers and the public to scrutinize how much damage was being done in terms of injuries and even fatalities after legal abortions in Missouri. And SB 5 in 2017 was a big part of that, keeping things on the up and up as far as making sure that we were able to better monitor those conditions and hold abortionists accountable.
Okay. And one thing I forgot to say is Dave's been a fierce warrior for pro-life issues in the state of Missouri for several decades now. And it's important to point that out because the people that do this are often unsung heroes. And that's true in the state of Missouri. I could mention other names here today that are unsung heroes. But Dave doesn't do this for accolades. He doesn't do it for praise. He doesn't do it for press. But I want to let you know, Dave, how much you've meant to me over the years. The struggles we've been through together, the battles we've been through in the state of Missouri. And at the forefront of it all was one of our generals, Dave Plemmons, the very man before you today. But go ahead and start. I'm going to ask one more thing here so I can get things rolling. And I talked about this a little bit before in the pre-show. Texas has made the news. It's big in the news right now, Dave, isn't it? They got something interesting done. They have made abortion illegal after 6 weeks. We have abortion illegal after 8 weeks in the state of Missouri. But we have a special weapon.
Well, not yet. That's in the court still, but
okay.
Yes.
All right, gotcha. So what's our special weapon that we have, Dave?
So, Missouri has been a leader for a long time. And I have to say, those that I'm really the most in awe of when it comes to my heroes, some of the people that I've had the privilege of working with for many years, people like some of the authors of our legislation, like one of our our general counsel, Jim Cole, our legislative chairman, Jerry Nieders, our executive director, Susan Klein, those people who work in the Jefferson City office that do the just the day-to-day tedious work of the record keeping and keeping the lights on for our advocacy and being able to do that. Those are the people that I look as the heroes who have made this happen. Missouri is a leader because great legislators, great authors, great people full of passion for the unborn and their mothers have tirelessly worked to make sure that we have good legislation that's going to pass statutory integrity and court challenges and that are going to be able to be looked at by the public as something that the public can get behind. There are people out there that think we could go farther, and we can and we will, but you have to bring the public along with you whenever you do something that is as consequential and hard to get done as a life issue piece of legislation. Because the next regime that comes along, if you don't have good seed planted in good soil, then that next administration can come along, or that next majority of your adversaries could be elected and pluck that good seed out of shallow ground. You have to be able to get it rooted, and that comes with public support. So a lot of the things that we do are grounded in making sure that they are things that the public can get behind, and only the most extreme of pro-abortion legislators are against those things, and that electorally works, because what you do is then you can paint your adversaries who oppose that good, common sense, publicly agreed to legislation. Those people that disagree with that, you can paint them as the enemies of life and actually be accurate and honest about that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and thank you for bringing up all the leaders in Missouri pro-life. I forgot to mention them earlier, and they're fierce warriors as well, doing the good work. And I think, one of the things that I've always kind of seen as far as the state of Missouri is concerned is a large advocacy in the general populace. I'm not sure all states enjoy that privilege, that there's a lot of people that care enough about this issue to pick up the phone, to call their legislators when there's good legislation out there that needs support, that needs nurturing. Sometimes needs...
I'm very pleased. Sure. Right. Yeah. I'm very pleased that Missouri Right to Life, the reason that our work has been successful is because people trust the brand. Mm-hmm. In the electoral season, and when it comes to voting, they trust the brand. When they hear that a candidate is endorsed by Missouri Right to Life political action committees, that means something to them beyond just a candidate putting it on their push card. Mm-hmm. When they see in the media, one of us quoted, it means something as compared to seeing a quote by someone from Planned Parenthood or NARAL or whoever. They trust that we are in it for Missourians from just a good standpoint, a neighborly standpoint, human rights, doing the right thing, morally upright. That's the side that we portray. Mm-hmm. And when they see us in the public sphere, they trust us because we have tried to do the right thing, in as much as possible every time. Have we made mistakes in the past? Everybody has, every organization has. But, we try very, very hard, and accountability with each other is a serious issue that we are very, very committed to.
Mm-hmm.
And I can get into all that as we, talk tonight, but yeah,
Sure.
that's trusting the brand. Trusting the brand is important.
Well, the brand is sterling. And in fact, it's so sterling. In fact, you have one heck of a grassroots movement. Most states per capita don't enjoy a grassroots movement that's, a friend to life like Missouri has with Missouri Right to Life. So the brand, as far as I'm concerned, is sterling. And you're right. I'm here locally with you, Dave, but I don't see hit pieces on your organization ever. They don't dare do that. You guys have a sterling reputation. That's for sure.
Well, and sometimes, in order to gain that kind of uh, uh, I don't want to use the
Credibility.
word reputation, but you might use the word reputation. In order to gain that kind of reputation, you have to be consistent.
Hmm.
Um, we try very, very hard to be consistent. Sometimes consistency doesn't win you a lot of friends,
Hmm.
in the among the people that you're trying to get elected.
Hmm.
Um, Other times it makes them your best friend, because if they're the person that you endorsed versus the others that didn't, then by and large they remain very loyal if they were fortunate enough to get that. So it's tricky sometimes, but it's important, and maintaining consistency is a large part of earning that reputation.
Gotcha. Let's talk about the state of all things pro life in the state of Missouri. Where are we at on all pro life issues in general, if we could put it in a nutshell, as opposed to other states? To give us some kind of benchmark.
Sure, sure. Missouri is often stated to be one of the most um, unborn friendly states legislatively. Um, we are consistently told, I suppose you could say, by the enemies of life, when you look at mainstream media, that there's about 7 states that are really looked at as being pretty hardcore when it comes to protecting unborn life legislatively.
Hmm.
Um, and we are among those. We've tried to be as proactive as possible when it comes to finding ways that we can hold abortionists accountable, that we can introduce ways of protecting unborn life, um, in various statutes, various regulation, um, and by and large, I think Missouri has done a pretty good job. We see by the numbers, and we have to remember a couple things when we look at the numbers. But um, abortionists in Missouri have dropped, as far as physical facilities. We have There's really only, within the actual borders of Missouri, there's really only one licensed abortion facility now. When I got involved in the Missouri Right to Life, there was probably about 6. Um, and licensing then would have been a very sketchy term, uh, loosely defined. But abortion facilities have dropped to literally one facility, which is in St. Louis, um, currently. Now, we have right across the border in Kansas City, Overland Park. We've got an abortion facility. We've got 2 large abortion facilities right across the river from St. Louis, um, in Granite City and in Fairview Heights, Illinois. Um, Plus, people can go to Tulsa. Um, there. So it's not like um, really hard to access an abortion, within just a few hundred miles. Um, but physically, facilities wise, in Missouri, we've dropped it down to 1, and it's because those facilities were unwilling or unable to adhere themselves to common sense regulation, in order to maintain safe. Well, when I say safe, I mean safer, for the women undergoing abortions, not for the unborn child. Um, so where injuries were less likely to happen because of better medical facilities. So that's been that's caused them to have to drop. They don't care to, or they don't want to, or unwilling to adhere to better regs.
What are the regulations there, if you don't mind me delving into this, what are the regulations they refuse to adhere to?
Oh, like
Is it ultrasounds?
making sure it's ultrasounds. It's
Mm-hmm.
making sure that only physicians are the ones that are doing the
Gotcha.
counseling, the meeting face to face with the actual physician that's going to be doing the abortion. So let me ask you, if you were going to go, let's say you were going to go get LASIK eye surgery,
Mm-hmm.
and would you want to meet with a kinda sorta counselor, um, um, that also might double as a receptionist, um, and maybe is also a somebody that is responsible for, um, let's say, doing the newsletter at your facility, at your LASIK facility, or do you want to meet with the doctor that's going to be actually doing the
Mm-hmm.
operating the laser? Given the choice, who would you rather consult
I'd
with?
be
You
meeting
would
with the
rather
doctor.
consult.
Yeah.
Right. So the person that's arguably most qualified to be the most knowledgeable, uh, have the most um, on the line as far as credentials go, that's the person you want doing the consultation. And the reason that they don't like these regs for having the doctors be the one, and it has to be, by the way, we have a 72-hour waiting period in Missouri. So that takes a consultation the first time, and it takes the procedure afterwards. So if a so-called physician, an abortionist, is doing that consultation the first time and then doing the performing the abortion the second time, they actually have to have a commitment that is a doctor-patient relationship. Okay, that's what they're trying to avoid here. The doctor-patient relationship in the world of abortion, surgical abortion in particular, is such that um, they have so many abortions they need to get done in a day's time, and they can't be spending all this time with single patients, that what you and I would consider to be common sense quality time with a physician in a consultation before surgery.
Mm-hmm.
They can't afford that. They don't want to afford that. They want to put them through the um, uh, run them through like cattle, if you pardon me saying so, um, and get that money rolling when the physician is able to spend 6 to 10 minutes doing an abortion and move on to the next patient in the next operating room. That's what they want. They don't want this consultation, that's going to take several minutes here, then it's going to take several minutes there. They don't want that because it messes with their cash flow too much.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big problem for them. But to you and I, surgery demands a patient doctor relationship of at least some consequence, some commitment, and to consider less than that would be, I think, very treating it very casually. But that's how they want to operate.
I
Um,
understand.
so that's a big thing right there. There might be, like you mentioned, the ultrasounds.
Mm-hmm.
There might be hallways wide enough to get a gurney through in case they have to call an ambulance, which the facility in St. Louis over the last 10 years has had at least 80 to 85 ambulance calls. So it's not like we're just making this up. These are actually, they keep count of these things. The eyewitnesses that stand in front of the abortion clinic and pray and offer women help that's besides abortion. They keep track of these and document these ambulance arrivals. And for a long time, the abortion facility was able to request no lights and sirens. We changed that in statute too, so they can't do that anymore. So they've tried to move most of their operation to Illinois, the People's Republic of Illinois, where it's a little more abortion friendly, a lot more abortion friendly to them, and they don't have to deal with quite as many what they would consider to be onerous regulations.
Yeah, and it's wonderful too. I remember when the Planned Parenthood Center was closed down in Springfield. There's a lot of fanfare among us pro-life folks that work that, and we never ever stopped anyone from getting an abortion. We never did. What we did do was show all the women that went in there that people care, and there's another way. Handing out not Planned Parenthood, but pregnancy care center documentation. Let's talk about that for a second, because I think that mattered back then, and it matters now. All the options ladies have rather than having an abortion. And we have the pregnancy care center. Now, every state has something like this, and it's usually funded by churches and private concerns. And that would be the case with ours as well. We call it the Pregnancy Care Center, and they're all over the state. They've got a huge footprint here. They offer an enormous amount of services, an enormous amount of resources. Can we talk about them for a second and why they're
absolutely
they're just a cut above what I think many other states offer, particularly states that don't have as loud a pro-life voice, literally dealing with legislature. I'm going to tie the knot here in a second, Dave. So we walk the walk, we talk the talk. Okay, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Yep. So we're not just an anti-abortion state. We're going to help you. We're going to show you the way. We're going to get you resources. We're going to get you options. That's what kind of state Missouri is. So we're not just, hey, listen, don't get the abortion. And by the way, you're on your own. You're on your own. No, we're not like that. We have all kinds of resources. And so let's talk about the Pregnancy Care Center. I know that the Missouri Right to Life has partnered with them in many ways and worked together with, go ahead.
Sure. So in most all of our localities where we have any presence whatsoever, it's the most important thing that can happen in the pro-life movement is the pregnancy resource centers.
Mm-hmm.
I will even say if tomorrow everybody decided that they were not going to donate to Missouri Right to Life or any legislative related, election related organization that did any kind of work on behalf of the unborn tomorrow, and they're going to devote all of their resources, be it volunteer, monetary, whatever, to the pregnancy resource center closest to their community, then amen. If that's what it takes to do this, then I say amen. So boots on the ground, the pregnancy resource centers are the ones who make the most things happen when it comes to actually being hands and feet of God's grace in a situation where there may be somebody who has a unplanned pregnancy, may have a something that is a domestic issue where somebody is dealing with a pregnancy and they have perhaps a partner who is less than supportive, abusive or coercive or things like that. You might have monetary needs or actual physical needs. There's all kinds of situations out there. The pregnancy resource centers are the ones who are taking these women in, counseling them, giving them, almost all of them, giving them free ultrasounds or finding someone to give them a free ultrasound where they don't have to pay for it at all. And then providing them resources. It may be job referrals. It may be help with
formula
diapers,
yeah.
Formula, and all those things.
Adoption services, if they so choose that route.
Yes.
Yes. Is it one-stop shop for adoption with the pregnancy care centers? I've heard this story before. I won't say who from. It doesn't matter who from.
Right.
If you choose not to have the child, but you know that child has a right to life, there's all kinds of options for adoption, and some of them most people
Right.
don't even know about. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Dave. Go ahead.
No. Yeah, like my friend Jeff Hicks with Missouri Baptist Children's Home and other people like that. That's what they do. That's what they're there for. That's why they exist, is for that kind of help. And many of them are ministries that are based out of their churches or their denominations. Many of them are even they partner with WIC
Mhm.
to help, in that situation. Excuse me. And it, there's it's an untold number, and we've actually statutorily taken a lot of the limits off. You can get tax credits for helping out these pregnancy centers. Part of the Alternatives to Abortion funds that we set up through Missouri, through the state funding of Missouri, through tax credits. Um, there's all kinds of ways for pregnancy centers to receive the help that they need financially through those means. And so so I like to tell the story of whenever I got involved in Missouri Right to Life. This was 1991, right after I don't know if you want me to tell this story now,
Absolutely,
but
it's fine, Dave. Go ahead.
so so the only time before 1991 that I did a couple things, when I was a high school student. I'd wear the little armbands that the Reverend Jerry Falwell would send out about the number of abortions. And then the year after I graduated high school was the first time that I ever prayed in front of an abortion clinic. My little old lady Catholic friend Rosie San Paulo,
I remember Rosie.
we prayed together 1985. She came and picked me up in her car, and we prayed together in the snow. This Baptist kid and this little old Catholic lady together. But it wasn't until 1991, actually 1990, in the fall of 1990, I found a book in a local Christian bookstore called The Scarlet Lady: Confessions of a Successful Abortionist. And it was the autobiography of a woman named Carol Everett, who wrote the story of how she became the director of like 3 different abortion facilities in Texas, and how they would cover up injuries, how they would put coupons in the yellow pages, things like that, and the ways they would manipulate women through fear and those kind of tactics to get them to increase their abortion numbers. And she was very financially successful because of this, and she finally had enough and became pro-life. Right after that is when I got involved with Missouri Right to Life. But I met them at a candlelight vigil in January of 1991. And the local director said, "Hey, can I borrow that book?"
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and so I said, "Sure." But the one of the things that I've noticed is that when I got involved in 1991, there were there was probably 800 maybe crisis pregnancy centers throughout the country. There were about 2,500 to 3,000 physical abortion facilities, surgical abortion facilities. Okay, so you're talking 2,500, 3,000 to 800 to 1,000 on that. Today, there are about 700, maybe a little less, physical abortion facilities in the United States, and there's probably close to 3,000 pregnancy resource centers around the country. So since 1991, the actual number of abortion facilities compared to pregnancy resource centers has literally turned completely around.
They flipped.
And the abortion numbers have gone from about 1.6 million to about 750,000 in that same time period. It's estimated that abortions are now at the lowest rate since Roe versus Wade. Life is winning when so many of our other cultural indicators are not.
Hmm.
It's really kind of amazing that, and the young people that are turning to pro-life is through groups like Students for Life. It's amazing to watch. But the pregnancy centers, as going back to that, the pregnancy centers, they're the ones that make it happen. People like the Springfield Pregnancy Care Center and
Mm-hmm.
all of the other Alliance for Life affiliates, and the link is in the YouTube for Alliance for Life. If you want to find a local pregnancy center where you're at in Missouri, you can find and volunteer and see what you can do to help them out. Of course, we want you involved in Missouri Right to Life, but if you've got time to do one or the other, then if they need your help, that's what you ought to do.
Yep, thank you for that. And by the way, what Dave's referring to is down in the description section of the YouTube video. All the resources are there for Missouri Right to Life and the pregnancy care centers. And I was going to actually save that for the end of the show, what people can do if they want to get involved in basically the pro-life. It's not a movement in Missouri. In Missouri, it's a revolution because it doesn't end. I mean, the pro-life movement itself exists in other states, but here it's a revolution, and we're very proud of that. Very active.
I'm going to look at some of the comments while you're talking.
You bet. You bet. In fact, guys, if you have questions for Dave, feel free to chime in. And welcome to Alex from the Free American Press, also a friend to life. Welcome, Alex.
Hello, Patrick.
Hi there.
Thanks for having me on. I was wanting to ask you, Dave, what's your plan for banning abortion in Missouri completely?
Okay, so can I ask you a question real quick?
Yes.
Is this kind of in relation to the abolition movement?
Just to ban abortion altogether. What's your plan to do that in Missouri?
Okay, so legislatively, we are working on a Texas style-ish legislative action. Now I need to disclose, and I'll for Timmy and the rest of everybody, I need to disclose that I'm the chairman of the Political Action Committee. I'm not the chairman for the legislation. So I don't. It's very important that the delineation of roles be recognized. I don't pretend to, nor do I assert that I have any decision-making abilities on what legislation we're going to push. Our board of directors, in consultation with our legislative team, that's and sponsors of bills, that's what they do. I am a part of those discussions. I'm a regular contributor to those conversations, but that's not my role. So I don't. Going forward, it needs to be clear that I am not speaking for the legislative team, in that capacity. However, when it comes to quote unquote banning abortion, there's a lot of things that can be done beyond what we've already done as far as actually stopping abortion, legal abortion. We do have a trigger law that was placed in the last major piece of legislation, the so-called heartbeat bill, which it was really an 8-week bill. But there's a trigger law included in that if abortion on the national level through court decisions is rendered to be negated or overturned, whatever word you want to use, and that returns to the states, that it will be outlawed, and that elective abortion will be outlawed in Missouri. And I don't have the language in front of me, so I couldn't really delve further on that specifically, but we do have a trigger law placed in that. Now, that is still in review before the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, that law, that statute that was passed, the tiered approach where there's a 8-week ban, a 12-week ban, so forth and so on. So banning abortion is, I guess we'd have to be more specific about the tactics that are used. Something, and I'm actually glad you brought this up, because if you don't mind me going down this hole just for a minute, there's people out there that have really great intentions, that have expressed a desire for Missouri legislators to simply assert through interposition, through our rights as states, to simply ban abortion based on the fact that Roe versus Wade was not a law. It was a decision from a court, but it wasn't a statute passed by Congress. It wasn't a law, which is very true. It wasn't a law. Now, if we go down that road, we have to acknowledge a few things. In order to ban abortion, there has to be some mechanism for enforcement. What would the enforcement look like if we banned abortion statutorily in Missouri, despite anything the Supreme Court said or done in the meantime? What would that look like? Would it mean sheriffs? Would it mean highway patrol? Would it mean local law enforcement? Who would be enforcing, actually stopping clinics from operating? Who would be stopping that? So before anybody answers that question, I want you to remember something that most people that are in support of banning abortion outright through states' rights, interposition, assertion, that in 1994, I believe it was 1994, maybe 1993, Congress did pass a law. That law is called FACE, F-A-C-E. It stands for Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances. This was a Clinton administration priority. Janet Reno, if you remember good old Janet Reno, she was a primary mover behind this. And what FACE did is it actually, through Congress, through an actual bill that was passed and ultimately signed by President Clinton, it actually banned the blockading of an abortion facility. Okay, you couldn't stop somebody from going into an abortion facility through congressionally passed federal law statute. Now that same bill, consequently, interestingly, I should say, that same bill also prevents houses of worship from being blockaded. That was probably one of the things they had to do to get it passed in order to keep it from being a poison pill. So when people talk about there being no law that allows abortion congressionally passed, you also have to remember that there is a law that prevents stopping abortion physically from occurring through blockading a clinic. So if you had a sheriff, or if you had a highway patrolman, or a local law enforcement, personnel trying to enforce a Missouri law that we passed that banned abortion, they could literally be in violation of federal law by doing so. So we have to be intelligent, strategic. We have to be smart about the way we do things, and not be a little bit impulsive. The other thing is what I mentioned before when we were talking about bringing the public along with you. So let's say we banned abortion in the next session. We have a veto-proof majority. Let's say enough of those senators that we like to talk about decided that they are going to pass a pro-life, an actual ban on abortion. So the public, are you going to hand NARAL and Planned Parenthood the actual verbiage for their next 10 years of fundraising letters? Are you going to just give them the next couple of elections for free? Because if you do not bring the public along with you, if you do not help through education, through winning hearts and minds, if you do not do those things, that any true movement that is going to last, you have to bring the public along with you. Sometimes that's done through visual imagery. Sometimes that's done through statute, because the law is a educator. There are many ways to do that. The media, the entertainment culture, all these things have to have to keep that ball rolling. But when you do not bring the public along with you, then that next administration and the enemies of life are going to use what you've done impulsively in order to hand you a more severe defeat, because they have the power to manipulate the media, the culture, the entertainment field. Those people, do you remember, Timmy? Do you remember the cloning debacle in 2006?
I do.
So when you had Michael J. Fox going off of his meds, doing commercials for the pro-cloning amendment 2 in 2006, telling people that we just wanted to keep people from having cures. Those evil conservative pro-life people, they don't care about cures.
Yeah, it was about embryonic stem cells.
That's right. The whole ESCR issue. When you've got people like Michael J. Fox that have the ability to go on TV and do these things and sway elections, we only lost that by basically 1%. It was close. We were within a week of winning, but we didn't. When you've got that kind of power, and you haven't persuaded the public to go along with you, then you're only inviting worse defeat later. So we have to be very careful and strategic. So I'll shut up and I'll let you respond to that.
Oh, well, I was I agree with you. I think we need to change hearts and minds, but it's just for me in Missouri, it seems like the people are already mostly pro-life. It seems like the majority of Missourians, like I know that on the national level for sure, it's probably more 50-50 for abortion, but in Missouri, it's probably around 75-25.
I agree.
So it just seems like we already have the hearts and minds, one in Missouri, to ban abortion. So, I do agree with you. Hearts and minds are really important, but also, action, like you've been doing, is really important too. So it's just, from my thought, if we could get the state legislator to vote, to ban abortion, a total ban on abortion, and if they voted for that, they represent the people, they represent their districts. That's at least what they're supposed to do. That's their function. I don't see why that wouldn't be a problem. I would see that as a really big victory. That would probably, you're right. The federal government would probably react to that in some way, but it's really comes down to whether the people in Missouri hold firm in their values or not. I don't know.
Well, and I only mentioned the FACE Act because some proponents of abolition, they like to talk about there being no federal law that allowed abortion, but there is a federal law that stops blockading a clinic. So it's mostly for education purposes that I mention that, not to make an argument. I just want it to be known that it's important that people realize that nothing happens in a vacuum. You have to do your research, and you have to be careful. Now, I respect and agree with what you're saying that when it comes to Missouri. Now, so let me ask you this: when the ads start rolling out, that we are ready to put women in jail for having abortion, and that we want to ban birth control, how do you propose responding to those ads?
Well, here's my solution. I wouldn't put the women in jail. What I would do is put the people who actually do the abortions in jail. So that would be my solution.
Thank you. Exactly. That's the difference, my friend. That's the difference. When you start drafting bills that are not clear in how they would handle those situations, that's when you give your enemies the ammunition.
Yeah,
and
but if
statutory language matters.
If the woman did do the abortion themselves, though, which is usually pretty unlikely, I would say they would have to go to jail for that, though, as well, though. But that will most likely, though, they wouldn't do that. They would want someone else to do, kind of the dirty work.
Somebody'd have to prove it, as well.
That's true.
You got to be. See, you got to. I can hear hear your wheels turning from this other side of the video. You have to think through legislation when you write it, as of how it's going to, the consequences of what it's going to be. That's why Missouri's been successful in doing this so far, as we've been methodical. Now, I know unborn children have been dying. I mourn the loss of them just like all of us do. But we don't allow more children to die later because we were impulsive in the way that we handle legislation.
Well, I think, basically, innocent until proven guilty, that's the law of the land already. If we
Right.
can't prove that the woman did an abortion, then we just don't know, and that's just another unsolved murder case, unfortunately. So,
Or a
yeah,
miscarriage. There could be miscarriages. There's all there's a lot of nuances that are going to be brought forward by those people that want to derail our goals.
yeah, but at least what we could do is make, abortion not a profitable business anymore, where they can make money through,
Right.
killing people. So do you think we could do something like that in the next session in Missouri? Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think the opposition is too strong in Missouri right now to accomplish that?
Are you talking about further defunding, or are you talking making it unprofitable? Which aspect do you?
Oh, sorry. What I'm talking about is criminalizing, putting them on trial for murder for the people who do abortions, such as Planned Parenthood and other people who actually perform the abortions.
In the state house, I would say you got a shot. In the state senate, you do not. Right now, you have. I know this is probably not what people want to hear, unfortunately, but in Missouri right now, you've only got about 15 or 16 out of 24 Republicans that would probably support that kind of an action. That's probably on a good day.
Okay, so that's
really the truth.
Yeah, so that leaves us two possibilities: either a governor's executive order or the courts. So, do you think either of those are possibilities?
The governor probably would not be interested in that kind of executive action. I can't speak for them or their consultants, but that may be a stretch. I don't see the courts. I don't see the courts being friendly to that. Something would have to be passed by the legislature and go up to the circuit court level.
Yeah, so you were talking about, winning the people's hearts and minds in Missouri,
Right.
Voters actually wanting to ban abortion. So what do you think of this idea, making like a proposition with the Missouri voters to actually have the people vote on it?
And if someone were to put that forward, if it was drafted well, if it had the kind of language that was how do I say this? If it was done in a way that was, I guess, that didn't appear to be punitive, if it appeared to be positive towards unborn children and not because words matter, language matters. When someone drafts a proposition, the way that it's written it makes all the difference of whether it passes or not. If it looks like it's something that is a negative and punitive and you have to vote no, versus something that is positive and affirming and you have to vote yes, that's many times what makes a difference in how it's framed and how it's written. Then that could be something that's worth looking at.
So do you think your organization can write up something to send to the Missouri voters?
Well, right now there's a little bit of defense that we have to play first. Some of our main situations right now are going to be dealing with Medicaid funding and going to abortion providers. We still don't know what's going to happen with the Hyde Amendment on the national level. So we have to prioritize what is the most thing that's going to protect life the most in the here and now. And Medicaid funding is a huge part of that discussion. So we have to look at that is the primary mover right now. We've also been trying to ban, and one of the things that legislation does is it teaches, it's an educator, it's a teacher for the public. So one of the things that we want to do is actually a bill that Senator Burleson has been trying to get through, which is a ban on dismemberment abortions. And dismemberment abortions is they're commonly called D&Es, dilation and evacuation, or they're, and pardon me for being just a little bit on the graphic side here, but abortions that require actual, limbs and body parts to be dismembered in the womb before they are the abortion is completed, thus killing the child. That's what we're talking about, is banning dismemberment abortions. Dismemberment abortions has been the ban on that has been passed in about, I think, if I remember right, I think that it's probably approaching 15 or 20 states. And that's something that we want to see done. It's a national priority. We're an affiliate of National Right to Life, by the way. I didn't mention that before. That's a national priority. We're trying to get that through Congress. We actually may have a hope of doing that, once we get another president and after next year and electing a newer Congress. But by teaching people, it's much like we did with the partial birth abortion. Stopping dismemberment abortion actually would save a lot more lives than banning partial birth abortion. And the value of the partial birth abortion debate was educating people on the gruesomeness and the violence of abortion in general, because it was actually a pretty brilliant tactic of causing people's visuals when they saw people like Rick Santorum and Congressman Kennedy from Florida back in the 90s, when they saw them with the charts on the floor of the U.S. House, the diagrams showing how a partial birth abortion was actually performed, and those images were on the nightly news. Those kind of things are what moves people. That's what moves hearts and minds away from abortion, because a lot of people don't know the difference between a surgical abortion in the first trimester and a partial birth abortion. They hear the word abortion, and part of our strategy with language is you get them to equate those terms together, and it's a very powerful way of communicating to the public, whether they know the details or not. And it really helps people understand. By banning dismemberment abortions, it would actually, and those generally occur in the latter first trimester, second trimester abortions. You're actually saving more lives than you would with the partial birth abortion ban. So that's another thing we want to do is I don't know if Senator Burleson's going to sponsor that again next year. We welcome if he wants to do that. So that the Medicaid expansion issues and the courts have stopped us from banning Planned Parenthood from Medicaid. So we're working on those kind of remedies. Those have to be the priorities with the way that we respond to what's happening in real time. Because again, we don't know what Congress is going to do with the federal Hyde Amendment.
Yeah. So one thing Patrick, my good friend, talks about is nullification of the federal government. That's something that Missouri has been doing a lot, with SEPA and a whole bunch of other different really good bills that have been protecting, the people's rights to life and liberty. So do you think if we were able to make, a bill where we would get the voters to vote on it, like we were talking about before, to stop people from doing abortions, do you think that could successfully nullify the federal laws if we put the right language in there?
Oh, it certainly could. And remember, those are very expensive to make that happen. So you have to have the ability to do media. You can't run a shoestring campaign and get that kind of a thing done.
No.
So you would
have 500,000 signatures, something like that.
You'd have to have, right. You'd have to have serious financial backers to help you to do media and get the materials printed to properly canvass, all the congressional districts. You'd need to and there may be movement on changing the rules as far as propositions and initiatives and those kind of things, and how many signatures you need and where you'd need them from, et cetera, et cetera. But that's something that could be a worthy goal to look at.
So how can we start?
I wouldn't count that out. I wouldn't count that out. That's
So Dave,
that's my opinion. I don't speak for the board in this discussion, but that would certainly be worth discussing.
well, that's great because I think all abortion, is murder. There's definitely worser types of
Right.
abortion you're talking about. So I'm just trying to think how we can stop this all this gruesome stuff that's happening. So how do
Well,
you
and
think?
let me invite you to think of one more thing too, and this is something that doesn't get discussed when you're talking about, and I'll back up. When you look at the research and you talk to people in these pregnancy resource centers, we spend a lot of time talking about how important pregnancy resource centers are in this whole discussion. When you talk to the people that are boots on the ground, the counselors, the people that run those facilities, the people that talk to abortion-minded women all the time, that's their main, whether it be their job or their volunteer job, that's what they do. When you talk to those people, a lot of what they tell you and what a lot of the research bears out is that a very, very large percentage of women who quote unquote seek abortions are not doing so because they want an abortion. They're doing so because there is a parent, a partner, a grandparent, an employer, someone who is another factor who is operating through pressure, coercion, other kinds of manipulation, be it financial, be it personal, be it threats of violence. These are factors that have to be looked at. So I want you to think when you're talking about banning abortion, that's an important goal, and we all share that goal. But if you don't find alternatives for the women who don't want abortions but are having to get an abortion through threats of violence, pressure, or coercion, when you don't help those women first, and you don't find ways to support them, be it through social services, be it through volunteer services, be it through not-for-profits, be it through other kinds of means, and I will say statute and regulation needs to support that goal. When you don't do those things, when you don't do those things ahead of time, then by banning abortion, you're not just hurting the abortionists. You're causing there needs to be a way that those women most vulnerable are helped in real time in the real world before we start entertaining thoughts of and I'm not talking about what you're saying, but what other people are saying, entertaining thoughts of putting them in jail, entertaining thoughts of punishing women seeking abortion, because so many of them aren't doing of their own volition. They're doing it through pressure, manipulation, coercion.
I definitely agree with that. So I think, looking at the options, it looks like we would need to criminalize, people who want to coerce people into getting abortions.
Sure.
Basically,
Yes.
because they're wanting to assist in murder, like any other crime,
Yes.
They coerce
Yes.
person, say, oh, go and shoot this guy dead. Those people are punished. So I think if we did do
remember Scott Peterson and Lacey Peterson, you remember all that?
Yep, I sure do.
Yeah, so if we did do a proposition, we would probably need to add that into the bill to criminalize those people who are coercing these women.
Yes. Yes. I like you more and more.
Alex is a likable guy.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate that. That's good discussion.
Well, I just think it's great what you're doing because, there needs to be, everybody, doing what you're doing. If we're going to, ban abortion, it's really too bad, they legalized, murder of the unborn, who Jesus said, the children are actually the most important people, So I think it's something, that people need to look up to you, what you're doing, because if we can't
Well,
stop abortion, we can't stop anything.
and I'm just a kid from Southwest Missouri that read a book, and God moved to volunteer to do this kind of thing. I'm nobody special. I have a commitment, and it's important that when we see what's going on, and decide to do something about it, that's when action happens. When we see what's going on and ignore it, or think somebody else is going to handle taking care of it, that's when it's a problem. And I just realized, Patrick, we haven't even talked about the political action committee stuff at
We
all.
sure haven't. That's okay. We
We're
can.
already an hour in.
We are, but I'll tell you what. We got some other questions that came in on the YouTube chat. If you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and ask them. They're
Sure.
from Dord. I know who Dord is. Thank you for the questions, Dord. Dord asked, and I answered the first one, but I'll let you answer the first one too. Can't someone just cross the state line right into Illinois and get an abortion?
Yeah. Now the question becomes whether they were referred or not. So
Okay.
there are laws having to do with what has to be done if an organization refers someone for an abortion. They do have to provide them with the material that's state mandated through statute. They do have to offer them the alternatives to abortion information. All those things have to be provided to them. Now, if you are just an individual and you're not going through Planned Parenthood or whoever, and you want to just get in your car and cross the river, then yeah, there's nothing that can be done about that. So
Yep.
when the legislators, and I'm not saying this to be critical of the legislators, because we couldn't do what we do without the fine work that they have made possible, and we do appreciate them. But remember, when a legislator says that we've only got the Missouri unborn children are no longer being killed by abortion because we've stopped abortion mostly in Missouri, they are going across state lines to have these abortions. We've made the facilitation of abortion through state resources and through state facilities much more difficult, but they can still, by and large, still go across state lines. A lot of what we want to do is through the changing hearts and minds, we want to make abortion make abortion unthinkable, not just illegal.
Mm-hmm.
So through educating people, through that fair booth that you go to where there's a picture of an unborn child in the womb, or an ultrasound, and you see those kind of things. You see the billboards around the state, your heart started beating at 18 days and things like this. Those are the kind of things that we want to get people's minds engaged and thinking about what abortion means, so that it's not that they want to get an abortion, it's that they see that it's available in another state and it's not in Missouri. But we don't want them to think abortion is something that is a positive thing. And the more we can facilitate helping the pregnancy resource centers,
Mm-hmm.
again, the tax credits, the alternative to abortion funding, Show Me Healthy Babies, all these good things that happen, then abortion becomes less occurring. A lot of it has to do with there are a lot of abortions that occur, especially in the inner cities and the more populous urban areas, because so many of those people are economically disadvantaged, and it does hurt them to think about bringing a child into the world, to think about what they're not thinking about what the positive sides of things. It's and what the abortion side and Planned Parenthood does very well is it amplifies that fear factor. I don't want to be pregnant. I want to this doesn't have to happen. I can't do it right now. I'm going to school. I've got a job, whatever.
What would my family
Maybe
think?
we interfere with that. What will my family think?
Mm-hmm.
Right. All those things. So they use fear to manipulate, and facilitate getting them fed into that economic monster that abortion actually is. It's highly profitable. And so changing hearts and minds and getting people to think about what it is that's happening with their unborn child, and what that life who that life truly is, then that's how we bring the numbers down. And that's a slow road. Unfortunately, our culture has been taught, especially since 1973, that asserting your right over your bodily autonomy, and stopping a child's life is an acceptable loss. That's a collateral damage to the freedom that you enjoy, as a person in charge of your own body. That's what our culture has taught people, and we have to unteach so that they unlearn that. And young people are much more pro-life than we give them credit for.
They are indeed.
And we have to be very grateful and thankful for that. This is several years ago, but it reminds me of the story of when several of the leaders of the pro-abortion organizations, they were at they saw the March for Life. And these were women in their 70s, 60s and 70s, and, people, Planned Parenthood, NARAL, NOW, these kind of leaders. And there was an article that I read where one of them got off the train and they saw all these young people with signs going to the March for Life. And she said, "My God, they're so young."
Mm-hmm.
And she realized that they're on borrowed time.
Mm-hmm.
The pro-abortion movement is on borrowed time. Life, it continues to advance. Now's not the time for us to let up.
Yeah, I agree.
Because we're on,
we've got momentum.
Like I said, young people are absolutely on the march. And these young people they're really in many ways leading the way.
Dave,
it's really exciting to see.
Hang on, Alex. Go ahead, Alex.
I was just gonna ask Dave, would there be any possibility that so going back to his previous question, basically, what's to happen to somebody who goes to Illinois and gets an abortion when they came back to Missouri? Is there any way we could penalize those people if they came back to Missouri somehow, once they're back in the state?
I'd be hard pressed to think of an example of any other situation where we would know. So that'd be hard to ascertain. That'd be hard to think of a way that you could do that. One thing is when they show up at the emergency room with a complication, then if it's a Missouri hospital, they are required to fill out a complication report to send to the Department of Health. So at least something can be tracked if the patient discloses where they had the abortion, which they may not, be required to do. They may just say, "Well, I'd rather not say," or "It happened here when it happened somewhere else." They could make, I don't know, they could make it up, but the complication reports are required with Missouri hospitals to send to the Department of Health in the case of a known complication that occurred after abortion. So there could be some tracking. Now, Illinois is not going to hold them accountable.
No, they're not.
So, I don't know what.
But Alex was referring to a hypothetical Missouri law, a prosecution in Missouri.
If they came back to Missouri.
If they came back to Missouri.
If they stayed in Illinois.
Yeah, I don't see how that could happen because, again, it goes back. A law is only good as, how much you can prove.
Mm-hmm. If you don't mind, Dave, I'm going to get on to the next question, if that's okay, because 2 more questions here in the YouTube. And I'm going to add a little bit here because I think I know what Dord was referring to. He said, what about underground abortions, underground or, back alley abortions? Does that become a problem in a state where abortion is kind of becoming extinct, where, basically,
So,
go ahead.
sure, that's good to bring up, because one thing. Okay, so if you've never read, which most people haven't, but if you've never read the book by the late Dr. Bernard Nathanson. Bernard Nathanson was one of the co-founders of NARAL. Back then, it was the National Association for the Repeal of Abortion Laws. This is before Roe versus Wade, and he was part of the team that tried. And he operated the largest abortion facility in the Western Hemisphere, by the way, in New York City. He had a staff of about 7 or 8 abortionists that were basically working around the clock. Mm-hmm. This is before Roe. Anyway, he told in his book, Aborting America, about how they lied about the way that illegal abortion was portrayed pre-Roe versus Wade. So, before I give you any flat answer of my opinion of your question, it's important to realize that back alley abortions, while they did occur in theory, as far as people being injured from doing their own abortion, or amateur operators doing abortions, a large number of the abortions that were done pre-Roe versus Wade were actually done by doctors, by licensed physicians, operating under the dark of night in clandestine situations, not necessarily by people who were not doctors.
Yeah. And
abortion.
And clandestine, venues as well, because they couldn't do it at the facility they were at. So maybe that's where the whole term back alley abortion came from. Because they were go ahead.
No, that's exactly right. So it's important to realize that abortion itself, surgical abortion itself especially, is unsafe because of the nature of the operation. And a lot of these people who were performing abortions were medical school washouts, people that couldn't hack it in the real world medically, and they wanted a money-making, easy thing to do, which to them was performing abortion. But a lot of women got injured because the nature of that is, if you are not good as a surgeon, you are more likely to cause women injury, basically, is the best way I know how to put it from what he had written. So when you talk about back alley abortions, remember, when Roe versus Wade was handed down by the Supreme Court, then the people from the back street, the back alleys, moved to Main Street to set up shop.
That's right.
So you have to remember, these are a lot of the same people, a lot of the same guys doing illegal abortions before Roe, changed to doing abortions legally after Roe. Mm-hmm. So don't let the pro-abortion narrative define how we look at so-called back alley abortions, because it's not always what you think, as far as when you actually read the accounts of the people that were actually there and did abortion before Roe.
Yep. So
they know what they're talking about.
Perhaps another way to answer Dord's question is maybe some of those doctors would once again do clandestine, procedures in clandestine venues, getting out of the doctor's office so they couldn't be charged.
Well, the future is probably going to be closer to what a drug dealer would be like.
Yep.
Because the abortion pill is now going to be moving much more into the forefront as more states move to regulate abortion surgically. In Missouri, we have banned telemedicine abortion several years ago. We saw this coming, so we we saw what Iowa went through with trying to ban telemed abortions, and we actually got it passed. So it's illegal in Missouri now for a what you'd call like a Skype type conversation, where there's a little box that's triggered by remote that's got a set of pills in it that is the abortionist pushes the button and the tray pops open, and the mother who wishes to abort their child within the first 9 or so weeks of pregnancy takes the pills and gets their prescription via teleconference. We banned that several years ago in Missouri, so they can't do that legally here. There is a organization from Finland, Aid for Women, who ships abortion pills all over the country, here in the States, probably in Missouri as well, in unmarked packages. We could probably work on strengthening any kind of use of the mail system. I don't know how well that would work, because if they're in unmarked packages, I'm not sure how that would happen. But I know Texas is working on that too. But actually making a difference when it comes to stopping. Oh, and there's also the do-it-yourself abortions. That's going to become more known and prominent. There's back before Roe, you had there would be groups of women that would get together to show them how to use syringes and things like that, how to do their own abortion. So you're probably going to see that kind of a thing again. Abortion self-care, they call it. So there's no way to, you're not going to stop all of it. You're not going to stop, maybe even a large percentage of it. You have to go after, like Alex said, you have to go after the operators, the drug dealers, the people that are pushing these pills, facilitating them, distributing them, mailing them. You have to stop all that. That's got to be the next frontier of a lot of things that we have to do. So, and we are looking at those things too, as far as legislation. But that's going to be a big part of the future.
Okay, thank you for that. And actually, yeah, that was a question that went on. There were several comments about the abortion pill.
Okay.
One thing that Dord had asked for was why, and once again, this gets into psychology, Dave, and maybe you have some insights in this. Why would a woman get a late-term abortion? What's her thought process on that? Because I mean that gets into the very, very sticky area of clearly this is taking a human life. So
Sure.
Would you mind touching on that one a little bit?
So there's a few things to remember with this. With late-term abortion, there is the mother who doesn't, believe it or not, who doesn't know she's pregnant until several months down the road, through maybe it's an unhealthy diet or drug use, or she's not been a regular, she's not been regular with her cycles to begin with, and she doesn't even realize she's pregnant. You have that happen. You've got people that hide their pregnancy from parents, or whoever. They just don't accept or come to grips with it until time just keeps passing. Maybe they even do things that are kind of, trying to induce a miscarriage through, certain physical activity or things that they ingest or whatever. You have those people. You do have people that have certain medical conditions who are recommended by, physicians that are not pro-life to have an abortion, be it fetal anomalies, congenital, disability situations, Down syndrome, for example, trisomy, things like that, where there's diagnosis of genetic or abnormalities, so to speak. And then you have very, very rare instances where there's people that actually have serious medical conditions, be it with their blood or be it with cancer, be it with, those kind of things, heart conditions, where they are really having to make serious consultation with their doctors and making choices how they proceed with, would it be better if they aborted to enhance their ability to perhaps survive some other medical condition. So those are the ones that I think of top of mind that are the most talked about or written about or known to be factors. So there's a large number of those situations that are kind of varied. Now in Missouri, most of the highest percentage, just like everywhere, the highest percentage of abortion do happen in the first 7 to 9 weeks, probably, well, 7 to 13 weeks of pregnancy.
I think George's referring to extremely late term abortion.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
New York style,
Right. So, I don't think the numbers are large, thank God, but they do occur. But I think that a lot of them, that there are many abortions that do happen with wanted pregnancies, but a healthcare provider or some other influencer that that has some kind of a medical relationship with them has convinced them that it's in their best interest to abort versus carrying the child to term. And a lot of those are related to genetic abnormalities, genetic anomalies, disability type situation, Down syndrome, that kind of a thing. But there are instances where there are other factors with medical conditions that are the mother's condition, where they're advised to have an abortion.
So, Dave, what is the abortion pill? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
It's two drugs, mifeprex and misoprostol. Basically, it's a 2-pill regimen. The first pill, the whole idea of the first pill is to make the womb inhospitable. Now, let me back up. It does have anti-ovulation properties like concentrated birth control pills, hormonal birth control pills. But the main function of an abortion pill regimen is the first pill starves the embryo by making the womb inhospitable. It basically dries up and makes the lining of the uterus unable to chemically receive an embryo. Because when an embryo travels into the womb, it has to attach itself to the wall of the uterus, and those chemical reactions start happening where it's an exchange of hormones, where that developing embryo, that baby, is communicating with the womb, and that's done hormonally. So the first pill is to shut that down by keeping the womb inhospitable to receiving the embryo. The second part of the drug regimen is to create the contractions necessary to expel everything in every body, the developing baby, as well as the all of the uterine lining. So stopping the uterus from being able to receive hormonally the embryo is the first part, and then flushing out through contraction is the second part. That's how it works.
Okay. R.G. Merkel had shared a story, but I'm not sure I'm going to read it. But it's heartbreaking in the YouTube chat. And guys, I'm going to ask you if you have any more questions or comments you would like for the live stream. Now's the time. We'll probably wrap it up here literally in just a minute or two. And what we'll do is we'll stay in Discord for half an hour. For those of you who didn't want to come in live or speak live, you'll have an opportunity to talk to Dave. And this is a tremendous opportunity for those of you who have questions about these matters, not just the state of Missouri, but procedurally with abortion, and also, basically stuff or ideas you can try in your states if you're not in Missouri. Based on successes in the state of Missouri, you're fortunate to have access to this man here and get, bounce a few things off of him, see what you can do. So any more?
And I want to say,
Sure.
I want to say, Pat, reading these comments, Crystal Roby, I'm heartbroken with you over what you've had to endure
Yes.
with your situation. I'm so sorry.
Yep, I saw that too. That's the tough part of doing these kinds of videos.
Yeah.
You get that kind of the stories come in, and your heart goes out to them, but I think everyone knows someone who's been touched by this issue. I don't think there's anyone you may not even know it. But
well, I'll tell a little bit of my other, besides the book that I read, a little bit more of my inspiration for being involved in this movement is I have a niece who actually was born on the day Roe versus Wade was handed down. And her name's April. She won't mind me if she's watching. She won't mind me saying it. She was her mother, my sister, unwed. The man who was her biological father tried to get my sister to go to another state for an abortion against her knowledge, and it would have been against her will. And then my mother found out about it and stopped the plan, thankfully. And my niece was born on the day Roe versus Wade was handed down. She is a literal day one survivor of abortion. And she's a reminder for me constantly of why it's important to do the things that we do. And I had another family member who actually was involved in abortion as a nurse. So I don't come through this with just, I don't have, I mean, I'm a Christian. I'm proud to say that I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, but that informs a lot of what I do. But I'm not pro-life just because I'm a Christian. I'm pro-life because I see my brothers and sisters in the womb need a voice to speak for them.
They do.
As when it comes to human rights, when it comes to human dignity, as a creation of God, as a member of the human family, they deserve respect because they are a member of the human family. And I'm one of these radical people that believe that human beings are exceptional, and not just animals. So I will continue to advocate for the life of the unborn because they're human beings, not because necessarily of anything else that I've learned, in a church setting, or although I believe that my faith does inform and absolutely backs up the pro-life sentiment and position. But if we have to ban abortion, ultimately, without doing so under religious arguments, then I'm okay with that. That's okay with me.
Hey, Dave, tell us about your PAC real quick.
So we actually have three. The Missouri Right to Life Political Action Committees there's a state PAC, which is having to do with state races, state rep, state senate, even the county executive in St. Louis. We've delved into that one, and we've delved into some county legislation, like we did that in Kansas City a few years ago. Some things that have to do with legislation on county levels. Sometimes we get into. That's what our state PAC gets involved in. Endorsing and opposing candidates is 99% of what we do there. We have a federal PAC that's involved in congressional candidates and U.S. senatorial candidates. So that, obviously is a big priority coming up, with all the changeover that's going to be happening this next year. Then we have what we call a victory fund, which is one of those big bad super PACs. I just like saying super PAC. That's more geared toward the presidential type things, where we can actually take in larger sums of money if there's a large donor that wants to help with that, and we can be involved in those kind of races as well. So the bulk of what we do is the state and federal PACs. We basically we monitor candidates, we survey candidates, we endorse and oppose candidates, and we use the apparatus of questionnaires, and then our newsletter and web presence, websites and Facebook pages and things like that, social media, in order to get the word out on pushing those candidates that are endorsed. We don't do much in the way of contributions to candidates. We generally, we're limited to expenditures that are independent expenditures that are done without the coordination between candidate and MRL PACs. We can say what we want to say without getting involved directly with the candidate that way. Because if you start coordinating, then the ethics commission and the IRS and everybody gets involved with those things, that we'd rather not them be involved if we're going to just make independent expenditures on behalf of supporting or opposing candidates.
Dave,
Yeah.
Do you plan on running for office?
No, sir. I can do more damage behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, Dave.
No.
Actually, I hate to say that, but it's absolutely true. Dave is a secret weapon of ours. Let's not send him to the dark side.
I just thought I would ask, since there doesn't seem to be very many good candidates who are running.
Sometimes that's very true. Go ahead on that, Dave. I'm curious on your take on that.
At the same time, I agree, but I disagree. In the last couple of cycles, I've actually been really encouraged with the number of people who are running, who are just, they're just sick and tired of it, and they're not going to take it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just decent folks. They might be a city councilman, or they might be an older woman, or they might be, they might be somebody that's really involved with, their agricultural, co-op, or they might be a local pastor. But there's a lot of people that are getting in the mix who, 6-7 years ago, a lot of the people that were running were just people that were lawyers looking for an ambitious way to get up in the power structure. And there's more and more people on the grassroots that are just, they're really, really stepping up and
Mm-hmm.
doing a great job. And you saw this guy in New Jersey, this truck driver that spent just a couple $100 and knocked off the Senate president of New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just people that are wanting to do the right thing. And it's really encouraging. I'm encouraged. I'm a glasses half full kind of guy. I really try to be, and I'm really happy with a lot of the people that we've seen wanting to get involved in public office. Now I will say one thing that bothers me is when you've got somebody that's running for Congress who's never, I mean, nobody knows their name at all. I mean, come on, people, start small, work your way
Mm-hmm.
get some experience under you, and don't just ask people to give money to you when you're not going to go do the work that you got to do to get it done, and get your name out there. And because it takes a lot of fundraising, it takes a lot of connections, and it takes a lot of glad handing and showing up at events and doing all that kind of thing. And if you're not,
like you said though already, it doesn't take that much funding to win a seat as long as you're a good
right,
person. Like that
right.
truck
But
driver.
I'll tell you, I looked at the Facebook page of this guy. And starting last year, he was everywhere. He was getting out there and he was doing it. He was actually going to events and posting all the time on social media. And sometimes I see candidates that they don't even have a Facebook page, or they don't even have you can't even find their phone number unless you look their page up on the Ethics Commission, and barely anybody knows how to do that. And they think by getting on the ballot they're going to get votes just by getting on the ballot, and that doesn't work in the 21st century. You look like you're really looking at some questions there, Patrick.
I was actually taking a look. First of all, Archie Merkel's saying goodnight. And I know I didn't read a lot of stuff that was in the chat. Some of it's just absolutely heartbreaking on many levels. All kinds of different stories in the YouTube chat. You guys can read them. I'm going to be praying a lot.
Yeah.
But I certainly do appreciate all of you guys coming in and sharing those. And a lot of them are, very personal. And that happens in stuff like this. And I Dave, I've in the Truth, Money, and Freedom podcast, I've done videos similar to these before, and I get a lot of hate in the comment section, because there are some people that really despise, and this is going to be my last question for you, by the way, really despise the pro-life point of view in a very, very weird way that I would, I don't even want to say what I feel it feels like, because, it's divisive. But you and I both run into this. We have, since, my journey with the pro-life folks is about 2 decades old, maybe just a tad longer. And I spend a lot of time at the Greene County Fair over the years, many.
Yes, you have.
And it's overwhelmingly positive. But once in a while, someone literally, it's happened 2 times to me, where a woman would come marching up to me and just spit in my face. Wow. And so I know you have to deal with stuff like that. And once again, vandalism to the car because of bumper stickers. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So, I mean, have you had to deal with any of that before? And I don't want to even end on a negative, but I just was curious, because I don't think we've ever had this conversation before in all these years.
Well, so years and years and years ago, when I first was involved, there was a situation where in Springfield, the abortion clinic the prominent abortion clinic in St. Louis, Reproductive Health Services, which is now an affiliate of Planned Parenthood, they did a very stupid thing, and they announced they were going to be coming to Springfield to open a abortion facility. This was 1993. they announced publicly through a half-page newspaper ad in the news leader they were going to be opening an abortion facility to serve Northwest Arkansas and Southwest Missouri, and plan to do 10 to 15,000 abortions a year. Well, we started mobilizing. We started doing everything that we needed to do. We got pastors together. We got people together. We got petitions going. We got, we were doing media, and I was doing a media thing on a local television station, well known for their news, and I was doing an interview with somebody that was well known for deep interviews. And after that interview, I got a phone. I had my own. I was living at home with my parents, and I had my own phone line. And he found my number in the phone book, and some guy called me, and he said, "Is this Dave Plemmons?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, you better get out of there because your house is going to blow up in about 10 seconds." That's the worst thing that's ever happened with anybody where there's been a threat. I've had conversations with people, and I've been in front of the abortion clinic where I've had people yell at me and different things like that, but hardly anything's ever been thrown at me, that kind of a thing. I've been very fortunate in those kind of instances. But what we have to remember is there's a couple things we have to remember. The first thing we have to remember is people that despise us, people that hate what we do and why we do it, come from a different couple points of view. Many of them are post-abortive.
Mm-hmm.
They have to, they're in their mind and their emotions, their heart, they have to justify their actions through lashing out, and through guilt, through shame, through anger, embarrassment, all those things. They have to find an enemy that's going to be a release for their emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow. You've got those people. Then there are the people who are just radically pro-abortion through their mixed up education. Maybe they're in their college they've learned that's just being pro-life is a terrible thing, and we need to be canceled as they term now. Those kind of people that hate what we do because it reflects a Judeo-Christian point of view or a conservative point of view that is counter-culture to their philosophy that they've been taught and learned of being so self-absorbed, and that anything that gets in the way of freely exercising any form of sexuality you want to without consequence is a big part of it. Sex without consequence, sex for pleasure instead of procreation, is a big part of the mindset for pro-abortionists. And the liberal mindset that says if you're trying to restrict abortion, you're trying to keep me from exercising my my liberties that are about me. It's about me.
Mm-hmm.
The pro-life movement is about our neighbor. It's loving our neighbor. Our neighbor that's unborn, our neighbor that's facing a pregnancy that's perhaps challenging or unplanned, and we want to provide resources for our neighbor. Mm-hmm. Because our neighbor is not just the unborn, it's their mother, it's their family, it's their father, it's mm-hmm. the people that need that support in the education. But I try to be kind in those situations. I've had candidates that I totally knew I disagree with that would call me, and we would just talk about. I made a commitment a long time ago. I've been the PAC director since the year 2000. I made a commitment to myself a long time ago that if anybody called me if they had a question, if they were a candidate and wanted to honestly know a question about the abortion issue, whatever, that I would be accessible to those people for educational purposes, and just to be decent to people despite where they were leaning, and that's important to me. I don't want, because I am here not just to help somebody get elected, or in some cases get them defeated, but I'm here to help educate people too. If they can learn something and learn that I'm not an ogre, I'm actually a fairly nice guy that wants to help you understand the nature of the unborn and why abortion is wrong. Abortion is an act of violence that kills a baby. And we have to keep telling people that story. But we also have to do it with love, grace, mercy, and accommodation when people don't understand the issue. We can't vilify people when they're ignorant. I strongly believe that. And it's the people that aren't ignorant, that know what they're doing, that have made themselves the enemies of life. They're the ones that I'm going to come after, in as far as the public arena, when they do the wrong thing. I'm gonna be their friend if they need a friend, but I'm also gonna be I'm gonna be a bulldog if I have to be, when it comes to elections, and showing them how it's gonna be.
Yeah. And before you go, Alex,
Dave,
hang on, Alex. Let me finish out on a positive note. That was a pretty negative thing, but I just wanted to get Dave's take on that because I figured he had to get a little bit of negative, just like I did. But I want to say something positive right now, and this is something Dave and I haven't talked about in about 5 years. I was working in Springfield about 5 years ago, and there was a young lady that happened to be at a place I was working at that was talking to me about getting an abortion literally tomorrow at the time, literally tomorrow, the next day. So I talked to her a little bit about what her options are. But, because I knew Dave, I had a secret weapon. I called Dave, and Dave literally was recommending, listen, get her to the pregnancy care center in Republic. And I'm like, this is kind of urgent. I'm working right now. Dave literally called someone, and someone came by and picked her up from I believe it was Republic Pregnancy Care Center. Brought her down there for an ultrasound. And that saved that baby's life. She's a very happy mother, too. And, it was just picking up the phone and calling Dave going, I need your help, dude. I need your help on this one. And Dave was there for me when I needed help. So, resources, aside, Pregnancy Care Center, the Missouri Right to Life has been one heck of a resource for me. And I can attest to one life that was saved, personally, because I had access to someone at the Missouri Right to Life, and that was Dave Plemmons.
Oh, that's really a good thing.
Amazing.
That's great that you did that, Dave. And I just had a question for you. So I was going back to, you said, we need to change the hearts and minds of the people, and it seems to me the best way to do that would be through the school system. Couldn't we get rid of sex education in Missouri and also hire like a new teacher to teach kids why abortion is bad?
Well, we did. Missouri Right to Life was part of actually getting Planned Parenthood kicked out of our public schools in Missouri. So we did that. That's been several years ago. All that stuff, honestly, now I'm going back to my opinion. I'm not saying this is a position of the Missouri Right to Life State Board, or anything in necessarily, but those are things that really ought to be handled on the local school level, in my opinion. And we want to be a resource for people that need resources to take to their school boards, and things like that. I do know there are many, 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 many public schools in Missouri that partner with the local pregnancy centers, and have a positive relationship between their school district and the local pregnancy resource centers. So maybe if there was if there was a way where perhaps through the DESI or somewhere we could get some kind of language that says that if there is a pregnant student or if there's counseling that occurs, that there has to be some state mandated information as far as alternatives to abortion given through the public schools. I'd have to look at, what is in the law right now that could perhaps be bolstered. But that, I think, is one avenue, if that's kind of where you're going to.
I noticed about the sex education classes, at least in my experience, it seems like in those classes they promote abortion. And I don't know if that's the same
Really?
in Missouri, but I'm making the assumption that it probably is.
Maybe rural versus urban may be a question there.
By that,
so yeah, I don't know. I've not heard any examples specifically, but if it happens, then that needs to be the local school board needs to be outed in allowing it.
I don't think we should get rid of sex education in Missouri.
I'm not. We don't take a position on that. I think that's obviously, and I'm a parent. I would say that that's best handled by parents. That if you're going to say no sex education, that's going to be difficult to get done, probably under the way that the education establishment is right now. I wouldn't necessarily oppose that, but we don't take a position on sex ed unless they're doing abortion referrals or abortion related material in the classroom. Think like school-based clinics, that kind of thing, or providing abortion pills or providing morning after pills, which is a form of an abortion. Those are the things that we could get involved in, but we don't take a position.
I don't think they actually
a position on sex ed in particular.
I think they actually usually refer people or stuff like that, but they're generally the people who are more talking good about abortion.
State funds, right? It's important to note that Missouri law, state funds, and that includes public schools. State funds cannot be used for abortion referrals. So if a school district is using state funds, then they're not supposed to be doing abortion referrals, period. So, because that's a state funding issue.
Yeah. So
we'd like to know if that's happening anywhere, because that'd be an issue to bring forth, for accountability.
I know in California the state requires sex education. Is it the same way in Missouri right now?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Honestly, I don't know if it's a requirement or not.
I don't know that one either.
I've never been asked that before.
But I'll tell you what, though, Alex. Hang in there, buddy, because I'm going to wrap up the live stream now. But we can continue in the Discord. So we've gone on for almost 2 hours now. When I told Dave, I figured it was going to be about an hour. So we've gone for twice as long. But I'll tell you what, though.
I'm glad there's people engaged.
Yeah,
people engaged.
There certainly are. And I want to invite anyone who is currently watching us on YouTube, if you want to come into Discord after we end the live stream to continue talking with Dave, if you have questions or comments or want to share a story or anything like that. And this is not the last time Dave will be on the show. I can promise you that. So Dave will be with us quite a bit, actually, going forward. So as we continue the journey in the state of Missouri to, basically becoming the best state for life in these 50 United States. So go ahead.
You care if I just mention a couple things just real quick before we wrap up?
You sure can.
So just some things of note for the viewers and listeners. Next year, on March the 8th, it's a Tuesday, March the 8th, we'll have our our Show Me Life Pro-Life Action Day. It's our lobby day for Missouri Right to Life. Tuesday, March 8th. We'll have a special speaker that we'll have in, and we'll have legislation that we ask people to visit their legislators and leave cards and ask to meet with them. And that's an important thing that we do every session, is our Pro-Life Lobby Day, Tuesday, March 8th. We want people to go to our website, MissouriLife.org, sign up to be in our Pro-Life Communication Network, get our e-blast newsletter that's delivered every Friday, join our socials, get on Facebook, Missouri Right to Life and Missouri Right to Life PAC. We have two different pages. We are also not as active, but we also are present on Twitter and Instagram. So join our efforts. If you feel so inclined, there's ways to get involved with membership, but be a part of what we're doing, because the grassroots is what makes Missouri Right to Life engaged and active. So we want to be right there in the thick of things, and the way to do that is to have the citizenry involved, and we can't do it without you.
Yeah, well stated, Dave. In fact, I was about to plug everything down in the description section.
Awesome.
The Missouri Right to Life has been a very important organization for me, gang, personally, for more than 2 decades. I've been more active in pro-life than I ever have been in the Second Amendment fight. So, but Dave and others, I can throw out some more names here, for those of you who are local. Carl Shimmick with Voice for Life, another incredible warrior for life. And you mentioned Rosie before, who's passed away. And once again, on the Voice for Life side, here's the thing, gang. This is one thing I noticed right away, starting out in Voice for Life. Voice for Life and Missouri Right to Life are partners, despite the fact, they're different organizations. They partner up on everything, and they recognize each other. They work together because they have the same goal. And that's one of the wonderful things about Missouri, is we see this happen all the time. But for those of you who would be so inclined, the email blasts, I get those email blasts, by the way, Dave. Of course I do. They're incredibly important during the legislative year. This is, and Dave will be very important to our organization during the legislative year as well. When there's a particularly important pro-life legislation in Missouri, you'll be hearing it from them. You'll be hearing it from Dave. You'll be hearing it from our network. This is how Missouri got to be a top-tier pro-life state, is because of networks like these. Dave represents a crucial part of that machine. So please consider actually signing up for the email blast at Missouri Right to Life. Dave has a political PAC. If you're so inclined, you can actually send a little bit that way. And once again, it's all up to you, gang. But the pro-life thing is something the Alliance has always been about. It's part of our mission statement. So I want to thank you for making the time tonight, Dave. Introducing yourself to our gang so they can get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you all. We appreciate all of you.
And I want to say thank you to everyone who participated tonight. Everyone, who had questions, for Alex, of course, Free American Press, and on the YouTube channel. And I'm going to ask a special favor tonight. I don't often do this, but there's a friend of ours in the Alliance. Her name is Jen, and she has COVID, is in the hospital on a ventilator. Now, she is improving, but there is absolutely no reason to leave this to chance. Let's ask God to take care of our friend Jen, bring her back to health, and bring her back to us so she can help us continue doing the good work in the state of Missouri. She just moved here from Oregon and was very excited to do so, and she loves Missouri, and we love her. So, guys, if you don't mind actually asking God to look after our good friend Jen and make sure she is nice and healthy for us as soon as humanly possible. Her husband is not even allowed to see her in the hospital. Of course, this is a silly stuff with the beer flu. Okay. All right, gang. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, but we will still be in the Discord for the next half an hour at least. So you guys are welcome to come in and talk to Dave. The link to the Discord group is, of course, in the description section. I want to thank you guys once again, not only for being with us, but also for understanding, some of the stuff that was talked about tonight. This is a sensitive topic. Not everyone agrees, but we can have the debate. That's another great thing about Missouri. So we can have the debate, we can advocate. And for those who don't have a voice, we need to advocate. We absolutely need to be there for them. Men on death row go through scores of attorneys. They are represented. They're covered. The unborn do not have that, except for you and me. So, and Dave represents a very, very big part of that in the state of Missouri. So thank you for everything you do, Dave.
We appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
All right, gang. We're signing out for now. And as always, God bless each and every one of you. You guys have a good evening. Come join us in the Discord if you want to continue talking. We'll see you next Sunday, gang.